Good evening. What you're about to witness is an unrehearsed, uncensored interview on the issue of birth control. It will be a free discussion of an adult topic, a topic that we feel merits public examination. My name is Mike Wallace. The cigarette is Philip Morris.
The Mike Wallace Interview.
Tonight, we go after the story of the woman who violated convention and bucked powerful opposition to lead the birth control movement in America. You see her behind me. She's Mrs. Margaret Sanger, who was thrown into jail 8 different times for her efforts.
When we decided to book Margaret Sanger, the sponsor, Philip Morris, was not especially happy. And the network was not especially happy because it was well known that she had an antipathy toward the Catholic Church on the issue of birth control.
They're celibates. They don't know love. They don't know marriage. They know nothing about bringing up children or any of the marriage problems of life. And yet they speak to people as if they were God.
Well, the natural law, they say, is that, first of all, the primary function of sex in marriage is to beget children. Do you disagree with that?
I disagree with it 100%.
Your feeling is what, then?
My feeling is that love and the attraction between men and women, in many cases, the very finest relationship, has nothing to do with bearing a child. It's secondary.
You simply had to admire her for the courage that she showed, for the determination that she showed, and not just on that half-hour broadcast, but what her life had been.
Margaret Sanger's commitment to birth control began when she was a child, traumatized by the death of her mother.
Margaret Sanger's mother died at the age of 49. I'd like to say died of old age because she had had 18 pregnancies, 11 of them bringing forth children, 7 of them resulting in miscarriages. And there's a family story that says that Margaret Sanger leaned across her mother's coffin at the funeral, pointing directly at her father and saying, "You caused this."
As a nurse in the tenements of New York's Lower East Side, Margaret Sanger saw other families like hers.
Dear Mrs. Sanger, I am 30 years old and have been married 14 years and have 11 children. If I could tell you all the terrible things that I have been through with my babies and children, you would know why I would rather die than have another one. So please, pity me and help me.
Dedicating her life to educating women about birth control, Sanger became a notorious crusader. For more than 20 years, she sought her own holy grail, a birth control pill that women could swallow as easily as aspirin. In the 50s, with money from a sympathetic heiress, Sanger went looking for a scientist to turn her dreams into a reality. The man she found was Gregory Pincus. An expert in reproduction, Pincus was famous for a 1939 experiment in which he astounded the world by fertilizing rabbit eggs in a test tube.
He was on the frontier of work in genetics, and it made people uneasy. There were attempts to caricature him in the popular press as a kind of Frankenstein who would, create children without fathers.
The hysterical reaction to Pincus's experiments helped push him out of Harvard University. By the time Sanger and McCormick found him, Pincus was doing basic research in Massachusetts in a group of old houses known as the Worcester Foundation. Margaret Sanger arranged a dinner with Pincus and asked him if it was possible to make a birth control pill. Pincus said it was, and that he was the man to do it. When his wife was skeptical about the prospect of such a pill, Pincus responded, "Lizushka, in science, everything is possible." Much of the scientific work had already been done. In Mexico, in the roots of yams, a renegade scientist had discovered a cheap and plentiful source of progesterone, the hormone released by females during pregnancy to prevent conception. Pincus knew that it was possible for women to gain birth control by taking doses of progesterone and so fooling their bodies into thinking they were pregnant, even when they weren't.
I once heard someone say that genius involved taking the old facts and looking at them in a new way. And I think that what my father did in this instance was take information he was already aware of and knew about and be able to look at it from a different perspective. that was his genius.
There were social problems. In Massachusetts, the transmission of information on birth control was a felony, punishable by up to 10 years in prison. The work that was being done in the Worcester Foundation could not even be discussed in polite conversation. Medical terms on reproductive biology were largely unknown to the general public.
Church groups and school groups would come through here. One time they came, and we were castrating hundreds of rats. And they were so enchanted with all these testes that we kept taking out and throwing off to one side. And they have a beautiful blood pattern on them. So they wanted to know more and more and more about this. And I couldn't explain it to them in terms that were socially acceptable. I tried everything. Finally, I got down to 4-letter words. And I got greeted. Each group, either it was dead silence or it was giggles. There was nothing in between. But it was the kind of language that nobody ever spoke.
By the late 50s, Pincus was ready to do extensive human field trials on the use of the pill.
They knew they could not do the trials in the United States. In the state of Massachusetts, where they both were located, it would be absolutely illegal to be looking for a contraceptive.
The first trials were conducted in Puerto Rico and Haiti. Both countries invited Pincus in because of their concern about the dangers of overpopulation. Pincus's daughter, Laura, helped with the trials.
There was a woman there whose husband was the head of tourism. She was a social worker. She was the social worker for the new clinic. And as we drove through the streets in her chauffeur-driven car, people hung on to the car, begging for information about birth control.
19-year-old girls with 10 children, all by different fathers. They were desperate.
In 1960, Sanger's dream was realized when the pill was approved for use. The pill was effective in combating birth rates, but evidence suggested that something else was going on.
In the town of Northborough, where Pincus lived, the pills were being used by the daughters with aspirin being substituted for the mother's little box, with the mother subsequently getting pregnant.
The real impact of the pill would be felt by young women who would find a sexual freedom their mothers could only have dreamed of.
I mean, I thought we were going to help these people that had all the children they wanted and had more than they wanted and didn't want any more. That's what I thought we were doing. I didn't think we were going to turn the world upside down.
Womp bomb loom bomb lomp bomb bomb to the boot, oh root, to the boot, oh root, to the boot.
The advent of the pill was part of a bigger change in American society, a breaking free of old bonds and restrictions.
Womp bomb loom bomb lomp bomb bomb.
While rhythm and blues was changing the beat of American music, Southern blacks were demanding their civil rights. An attempted ban on a poem called Howl was struck down, and Bridget Bardot first appeared on American screens. Elvis the Pelvis was topping the American music charts at the very same time that Goody Pincus and Margaret Sanger were handing out their first birth control pill.
Oh Rudy, oh womp bomb loom bomb lomp bam boom.
I thought all the things that contributed to the sexual revolution in the 60s were seeded in the 50s. It was an increasingly sophisticated society that was trying to push down the barriers of this narrow Puritanism. And then, of course, when you had the dramatic change in technology with the coming of the pill, the explosion took place.